Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It's Monday, March 17th, 2014, St. Patrick's Day here in the United States. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis. A fantastic program lined up for you. You're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look well beyond the headlines and bylines and look beyond the fog of disinformation, misinformation, intentional distraction, and misdirection to bring you the news behind the news. For the new listeners, and we do have many, we want to thank you very much for checking in tonight. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us, of course, our home base on the Internet is HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we walk through this series of serious events together. Just want to say hello, Joe. Welcome to the studio. It's been a rush here in the last couple of hours.
We're attending a wake. We got here kind of late, right up against showtime, and I chuckled there when you said it's St. Patrick's Day because that's news to me. And it makes sense now why I thought it was Friday, seeing all the people running around the streets partying.
I was going to say, did I make a mistake? It's very possible if I made a mistake, but okay. Well, yeah, I guess. And you know what? I never figured out, is that celebrated throughout the country or in the West, throughout the West, or is it just the United States or United States, Canada? What is that? I never really...
Well, it's an Irish holiday, if I'm correct.
Okay.
And apparently the United States has taken, through its huge Irish population that has come over here and continued to grow, that they've brought their celebration with them. And aside from the drunkenness, I'd say it's not a bad holiday when it comes to food and all that, but unfortunately people use it as a reason to get quote-unquote plastered, and it turns into a bit more of a mess if you go out rather than an actual holiday. You're muted.
Oh, I keep doing that. I apologize, folks. A little off tonight. In fact, I was supposed to be off tonight. I chose the way things worked out. I was able to come back in, and
he just didn't want me to do the show alone.
I don't trust him.
He likes to do the show alone himself, and then he's getting me ready to do the show tonight, and he says, "You know what? I'm going to do the show."
Well,
which is fine.
The timing, the time was originally scheduled for. Never mind.
And I need you tonight with the person we're going to have on.
Yeah, folks, at 9 o'clock, at the top of this second hour, we are going. I'm going to tell you something. Okay, nearly 30 years as an investigator. Very rarely do I run into people who have this innate ability to ferret out truth and information, and this really good ability to really do research. I mean, there are people that, Joe, you were taught, you grew up in a kind of an investigative environment, but
not by choice. Yes, I was definitely raised.
But the woman we're going to have on at 9 o'clock, from 9 to 11, has done just a tremendous job in the research and investigation of the death of Loretta Fuddy and the connections between Fuddy and Obama and really what's going on there. In fact, she was...
This is the lady with the footage who...
Well, right. She took she took the footage that was aired on the various networks and was able... The videotape footage of the plane crash and slowed it down and did some things, analyzed the film. The bottom line is that footage that was aired was heavily edited. And there are reasons for that. Now, I'm not going to get into the reasons. We're going to wait until the second hour to do this, second and third hours. But her internet name is Butter D Zillion, okay? I know it hey, go figure. But
hey, whatever works. And
right.
While we're doing housekeeping here, we have an excellent week lined up for the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Butter D Zillion talking about Loretta Fuddy tonight. Tomorrow, Stan Dale will be on his regular time. Wednesday, we will be joined for the whole show by Doc Marquis. He will also be speaking at the Prophecy in the News Conference in Orlando. He'll be on before this Wednesday. He'll be on Wednesday, and then he'll be on after the conference when we return. Then we have on Thursday Tom Horn and Steve Quayle, which was going to be a fantastic show. And closing out the week, none other than Mr. Augusto Perez. It's going to be a great lineup.
I got to tell you, I want to thank you, Joe, for lining all that up. I'll take credit for tonight and Thursday. Steve
it's kind of easy when it falls in your lap, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Although tonight, I will say this. Tonight, the guest that we're having on tonight is not seeking fame. In fact, we had an off-air conversation, and she said, I just want to stay out of. I really don't want to do this. I don't want to be an investigator. I don't want to be on the radio. I really don't want to do this. She's not looking for fame, fortune, or anything. She's just a great lady, and just a tremendous investigator. So what she's going to have to say, and I'm going to be here this first hour. There's going to be an audio that's going to be playing, and when Joe's putting that up, I'm going to be putting links to her blog, her investigative results on our front page. Finally, it's starting to move, right? At least some new fresh content for the first time in 2 weeks. But you've got to take a look at the images, at her findings. It's just tremendous. But Thursday, Xenogenesis. Yeah, sound effects. I got this phone.
You hooked the phone up over here.
How do we? Okay, now I do know how to turn this. I better not press any buttons here. I really better not. Okay, here we go. There we go. Hang with me.
Ringing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. The last time I pressed buttons on a phone, I really think bad things happened. Of course, that's what you get when you fly in 2 seconds before the airtime. Thursday, Xenogenesis. I received a copy of Steve's book in the mail, Xenogenesis. Joe, did you look through that? You didn't? That's right there. Fantastic.
I looked at the cover and the back, and in the back. I read the back. I did not get into the chapter. I didn't even look at the contents yet. But your article, as you said, is in here.
Yeah, page 5. It begins. But
page 5.
But I got to tell you, looking through and skimming through this past weekend, because I got it on Saturday, and it was. I don't think I've sat down for tonight. But the book Xenogenesis, I believe, is probably Steve's best work, and I really believe that for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into that later in another program. Well, Thursday actually is when we're going to get into it, because he's going to come on and talk about the book and the overlap of investigation between Steve and Tom Horn is just incredible. So, having said that, I just can't wait for Thursday, and of course, tremendous lineup. And I want to thank you for scheduling all those guests. And the following week, we're going to be in, I think, Orlando, right?
Yes, we are.
In the run-up, okay, because we have a couple of meetings early on in the week, and then we're going to, in the run-up to the conference on the 28th.
We have not really decided how we're going to handle shows. I will tell you guys this, though. We will be airing a few rebroadcasts during next week. Don't know what days we're going to do live, if any. Don't know what days we'll air a broadcast if we decide to go live or not go live. We'll have to be figuring that out this week and have a better idea.
I really think that we should do attempt to do all live, and the reason for that is things are happening so quickly in Ukraine and other locations. Plus,
maybe we can pre-record them from 4 to 7 in the morning, and then. When's the last time you were on vacation?
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Not that this show is a burden or difficult.
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't look at this. With the things that we've got in the first part of the week, I don't know.
Maybe we can do like a every other day type thing. And who knows, maybe we'll talk to some speakers down there who we have not had on as guests, and maybe we can do some live radio with some of the speakers down there. Who knows?
That's true. And more house cleaning, keeping, whatever. This past Saturday, I was on Coast to Coast AM for the first hour. Folks, I don't know if you caught that or if you care to catch that. I was on with a guest host for Coast to Coast AM Saturday night. An absolute fantastic host. He's just a tremendous guy. In fact, he does conspiracy radio out of Toronto, so we were both on the same time zone. It was both 1 o'clock in the morning for us on Saturday or Sunday morning. But I thought it was a good interview. And then, of course, he had Greg Palast on after, the investigative journalist after me. And I think I listened to at least 2/3 of it. And Greg talked a lot about the oil chicanery that's going on with respect to Ukraine, Russia, and all of that. So it's a very topical show. If you can find it on YouTube, I know that I think Streamlink, that's a subscription-based service. I know they've got it, but I try to be at least coherent for that. But anyway, but with respect to the following week in Florida, if we can, Joe, I really think we need to.
We can do a few live shows. I
think we need to really hit it hard. And we'll drag a couple of people to, or we'll do it like from Radio Row.
We'll make a deal.
Have one.
We'll do live shows with telephones from the beach.
Or 8 to 11 at night.
Yeah, we'll do a few shows.
And is there any waterfront in the center of Florida? I mean, aside from swamps and man-made lakes? I
know we're going to be near a small lake, what some would call a pond. Probably has alligators in it, not something you might want to sit by and relax.
I'm going to tie chum to your legs and sit you out there at the pond at night. What do you think about that?
We can at least do it outside. We do have a big net to keep the big bugs out.
Actually,
customary down in Florida.
We did not. We're not staying at the hotel, the conference, for a couple of different reasons. I'll just leave it at that. So. What's that?
Kidding. I said bed bugs. I'm kidding. Around New York City.
Yeah, New York City. It's something. If you're traveling in New York City and New Jersey, when Joe and I were working there, we had to check the beds and the towels.
We couldn't check into a hotel before we had to learn if the hotel was infested with bed bugs, because about 40, if I remember correctly, 40% at least of the hotels in New York City and the surrounding boroughs had bed bugs. So we had to pick and choose very carefully.
Absolutely. Well, enough of the small talk. We do hope, ladies and gentlemen, you had a great weekend. Seriously, it was just a tremendous, for us, it was pedal to the metal all weekend. But anyway, Joe, you've got a fantastic audio clip. This is a compilation of things. But
yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you. You go where you want to take us, because I just, like I said, I've been 2 minutes ago. Flew in there, so
I want to play this audio. I uploaded it. It's called "Wake Up Church." I posted on Facebook a couple weeks back. Some people might have heard it, but it's very powerful, and it's going to set the tone for this week of shows. What we are going to get into, and it is a compilation of different pastors. Just to name a few, David Wilkerson is one. Let's see, Leonard Ravenhill is another one, and a few more from the Times Square Church. It is a excellent compilation of describing the church today and where it's gone wrong and what can be done to make it right. So I'm just going to play it. It's 10 minutes, and it is well worth the listen. Here we go.
You will rarely find a message now on repentance. Look at what has become of the world, Church of Christ, through you, losing what you should have been. But God waits for His people. God waits for His people. When will they take the stepping stones God has placed in His Word? Church that has forgotten its foundations, a church that's turned away from its beginnings, and begins to become a harlot church.
Just tell me how blessed I am. Just tell me I'm going to be powerful and popular and going to have no trouble in my life. Just tell me these things.
Watered down, half-truths. This gospel says, just believe and get saved. There's nothing of repentance, nothing of godly sorrow, nothing of turning from your sins, nothing about taking up your cross and following the Lord. But people who say a little prayer said, you're fine, you're good.
People believe that any standard, even if the New Testament is legalism and bondage and law, any standard is law. I'm under grace, I can do anything. Oh, that's from the devil.
Now, we've revised that and said, if you can get people for 1 hour on Sunday morning in the building, that's the church. That's not the church. We can use every device we want to get people for 1 hour and keep it early and keep it moving and keep it going. But that's not the church Jesus built.
And I'm embarrassed to be part of the Church of Jesus today because I believe it's an embarrassment to a holy God. Most of our joy is clapping our hands and having a good time, and then afterwards we're talking all the drivel of the world.
Don't talk to us about holiness or separation from the world. We don't want to hear that, folks. People today don't want to hear anything they call gloom and doom. If it's not smooth, it's gloom and doom.
Well, friend, let me tell you lovingly, go to hell and live with all the scum of the earth. You like to drink, go with the drinkers. You like to lust, go with the prostitutes.
To have been covered in something deceptive, to find in the last moments of your life that the feet coming down the hallway are not taking you to heaven. You can get through the deception your whole life. You can even sing in the choir.
And I think we better watch this business of, God loves you, and all the bumper sticker sloppy evangelism. Will you remind people of the goodness and the severity of God? Will you remind them that there's a day when mercy is cut off forever? Will you remind them that people pray in hell but nobody ever answers?
But in spite of what God has spoken, they create a garment of fig leaves and they cover themselves and say, all is well, all is well. And they seek out a church that won't challenge their sin, that won't expose this hypocrisy for what it is. I'd rather you get mad at me and go to heaven.
This so-called love gospel today only reaches the flesh. It can't get to the heart. It can't dig into sin so that there can be a cleansing. And if I'm a surgeon of the Holy Ghost, I'm not going to put a bandage on you when you got cancer sticking out of a bone or on your flesh. We're going to say, hey, we got to get in there. It has to be dealt with. And we do. I don't care if you like me, but I'm a good surgeon, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to get your cancer out.
This is the reason why some who are listening even now and will be listening to tapes in the future, you just can't lighten up and enjoy these theologically shallow experiences like so many around you are today. Everyone around you saying, oh, lighten up, lighten up. God's love, God's good, God's kind, God is nice. Come to church in your Bermuda shorts, stick your feet on the altar rail, have a coffee and cookies with us. We'll hear 3-point messages on nothing about God. But there's a stirring in you. There's a stirring in the true bride in this generation.
Now, I'm going to tell you something. A diluted gospel is no gospel at all.
Businessmen. They were crass businessmen coming into something that God said, my house shall be called a house of prayer. You made it a den of thieves. You're getting over on the people. Out with you.
And if you don't believe this is happening in our generation, I challenge you to go to a Christian bookstore this week and find the bestsellers. Ask them, which are the bestsellers? And look at them. Look at the covers. They're the images of men, not the images of God. 5 steps to be like me. 5 steps to better yourself. 5 steps to the new you. 5 steps to a wonderful destiny with their glossy faces on the cover. Not so subtly telling the Church of Jesus Christ, if you use the principles of God, you will look like me.
In the 14th chapter of Romans, and he says we, so he writes home even to believers at the judgment seat. We must all, there's no exception. We must stand at the judgment seat of Christ. You can't send your lawyer, you can't send a representative.
Because one day, it doesn't matter if your friends approve of you, doesn't matter how many albums you sell, one day the Bible says, I'm going to stand in front of the one whose eyes are like fire, and I can't get over on him. All of you that sing in that choir, it's not just if you're on your note, it's why you're on your note.
Can you see all the saints of all the ages? And Leonard Ravenhill is standing there before a Christ whose eyes are full of holiness, where the place is breathing holiness, where there's all the majesty of an awesome God. And he reads the record of my poor life before all the saints of all the ages.
Unto God, all you theologians reasoning out my theology. Says, unto God, are you pure in heart?
And you became enamored with your own beauty. And your whole theological focus now is how you can be smarter, better looking, more prosperous. You lost the call of God, church.
You've made it a place just to make a buck. So out with you.
Church of Christ with God, when will you grieve most? Hunger, thirst after righteousness.
Now I'm going to tell you something. A diluted gospel is no gospel at all.
Become new, but when the church is in the state we are, the standard is not preached or lived or presented. We need to see God back for the standard of this book, not men's standard. What Christ says. I'm not presenting to you some holiness of a holiness movement. I'm teaching to you Christ's words, that the only holiness is not heresy.
I want to challenge you with everything in me. Put away lifeless religion. Put away empty pursuits of God. Put away all of the deception of the carnal nature.
Holy, be ye holy, for I am holy. That's God's words, not mine.
Would to God that Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal pastors begin to stand up and see what's happening to the church that was once called the Church of Jesus Christ. Backsliding, turning apostate, turning against the truths of their founding fathers.
When I see the church in the New Testament, they didn't have stately buildings. They didn't have paid evangelists. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have organization. They couldn't get on TV and beg. But I'll tell you what they did. They turned the world upside down. But are you big enough to say, Lord, in this crucial hour in human history, let me fill up the sufferings of Christ?
But if the Holy Spirit is truly upon you in this generation, you will not be satisfied. You will not be found among those who sit in supposed houses of God with your feet on the altar rail and a cup of coffee in your hand, listening to a PowerPoint sermon about a Christ they don't know. You'll not be satisfied.
Because if you're going to get mature in God, all the dwarfs around you will criticize and sneer at you and say you're trying to be holier than the rest of us, For God has not merely given us Jesus Christ, He's given us all things. And because there isn't enough joy in the house of God, we need entertainment. Because entertainment is the devil's substitute for joy.
We're living in a time, as the prophet Malachi said, when those who feared the Lord are going to get together one more time and think on His name, and a book of remembrance will be written for them, and they will return, and they will know the difference between those who serve God and those who don't serve Him.
Folks, we've got to deal with sin. We've got to deal with things in our life, they're divorcing and all these things we have to do something about. We have to face a holy God one day.
There's a great trial coming, folks, for everyone. Praise God. He's going to deliver the true believer.
I want you to change your message. I'm telling you now, the judgment is at the door. The handwriting is on the wall. The whole world is shaking. And you're amusing this people.
Even if you have to bury your theology, sir, just bury it tonight and get right with God.
Just turn from your sin, for all this society is about to come under the justice of God.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is called Wake Up Church. You can find it on YouTube under that title. Very well put together and moving audio clip compilation that is very sobering. And I think it is important to understand the messages that are given through the different pastors that are speaking there. And, I don't know much about some of the other pastors aside from David Wilkerson, but we need more pastors like those people that tell the truth no matter if it's politically correct, if it's popular to the congregation or the people. no matter what the truth will do to them, they are not afraid to speak it. And that is lacking in the church today. And that will really set the tone for the rest of the week. Tonight, our guest, it's not going to be so much about Scripture and Bible prophecy as it will be talking about Loretta Fuddy and the birth certificate and the odd circumstances surrounding that. But the rest of the week will be fantastic spiritual shows. So I'll put a link in the chat room, and you guys spread it around amongst yourselves, and I'll try to get it to anybody who would like it, who can't find it, if you just send me an email. You can get my email from HomelandSecurityUS.com right under Joe Hagmann. You click on it, and the email will come up, and I will send you the link if you can't find it. Once again, the title is Wake Up Church. Just go on YouTube, type in Wake Up Church if you want that clip. There's also several other good ones that are longer, also compilations. The Fear of God Has the Church Lost It? That's one of them. It's about 26 minutes, and it is a little calmer, but has just as heavy as a message as that last one. Anyway, getting into some news tonight. We have a lot going on, and I don't know why it feels like Friday in my mind. If it's St. Patrick's Day, if it's all the stuff going on in our personal lives, and then this trip coming up, or whatever it is, but it feels like Friday in my head. But anyway, it is Monday, March 17th, 2014, and we'll be joined by a guest in about a half hour. And I want to start off tonight with a story we talked about last week, the U.S. ceding control of the Internet to an international body. Well, now we have news. When U.S. steps back, will Russia and China control the Internet? Some fear foreign powers will fill the void. The United States is planning to give up its last remaining authority over the technical management of the Internet. The Commerce Department announced Friday that it will give the Internet Cooperation for Assigned Names and Numbers, an international nonprofit group, control over the database of names and addresses that allows computers around the world to connect to each other. Administration officials say U.S. authority over the Internet address system was always intended to be temporary, and that ultimate power should rest with the global Internet community. Some fear the Obama administration is opening the door for Russia and China to take over the Internet, as well as other countries that are eager to censor speech and limit the flow of ideas. If the Obama administration gives away oversight of the Internet, it will be gone forever. That, according to Daniel Castro, a senior analyst with the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. This, as I said, we covered Friday. The U.S. wants to give up control of the Internet, and China and Russia, Iran, and dozens of other countries are pushing for that control through the International Telecommunications Union, a United Nations agency. Pretty interesting, pretty scary, pretty uneasy about this. Wonder what's going to happen, how it will change the Internet, especially when you have Senator Jay Rockefeller spearheading the move to relinquish control of the Internet to the globalist, the global Satanist, or the United Nations. And they're going to hand over control to countries like Russia and Iran and China? And they're okay with this? Is there a usefulness of the Internet over with? They provided enough misinformation and doom distractions to fill the void from the real news that is about to come. To me, the symbolism of relinquishing the control of the Internet means more than just handing it over. It means a new phase in global politics or global geopolitics. And I am uncertain as to what that means or what that will look like. But for the U.S. to say, okay, this is not, controlling the Internet is not that important to us anymore. Here, Iran and China and Russia, you do it. Says a lot. Would you, if you had a baby, would you let the, I don't know, next door neighbor, 10-year-old troublemaker babysit your kid? I know that's kind of a bad comparison, but we are handing over control of the Internet to a global international union headed by the United Nations, backed by Iran, Russia, and China to lead the way. And Jay Rockefeller.
John Rockefeller.
Jay
Jay is just well, he changed his name to Jay.
We should just call them the Rockefellers.
Yeah, and you know where this is going, folks. You do know where this is all headed. This is all headed for internet censorship. Freedom of speech is going to be censored, criminalized ultimately. This is a big deal. This is a huge deal.
I guess game on. How long can we stay on the air?
Well,
and how many times can we circumvent their systems to try to get us off?
Well, I'll tell you this. There are ways around that, and we are actively pursuing those, circumventing the system in a number of different ways. So just understand that we know what's going on, and but see, this is a really good segue into our second hour guest, where she had posted her findings on various, on one particular forum.
Could that have to face some sort of approval before being allowed to post?
Can you imagine the moderation? For example, hey, we're going to moderate your program. We're going to moderate your comments. This is where we're headed to in the bigger picture.
We have to speak sentences into a box and hear it say okay before we get to say it on air. I mean,
well, yeah. Wow, there's just a lot to this. And we really need to pay very close attention to what's going on here with respect to the internet. And also, if you've noticed, folks, have you noticed lately where YouTube videos, for example, suddenly are taken down, or you can't find them, or even the numbers are being played with to make it appear as if it's not a popular video?
On top of that, YouTube itself has been experiencing very odd malfunctions to where videos are not available. You'll click on a link to a video you saved, and it'll come up as no link available. No video. You'll search a title of a video you made and not find it. Our service is down. Come back later. There is something going on with YouTube, and things are being censored. View counts being lowered. Kind of like our numbers sometimes. We see them fluctuate. We'll have a show, let's say last week, and say we had 100,000 listens. Well, a week later, it'll say 85. Somehow change magically. After 7 days, it'll drop down. And that's not always the case. And
no, but it's funny, too, when that does happen, and I've seen this happen to other shows as well. You will see either a sports show, and we watch this very carefully, either a sports show or an atheist program take the lead.
I'd like to see them. I wish we should get in touch with those hosts and ask to compare numbers.
Well, I'm not sure we would get. I'm not sure we would get any specific straight answers on that. And I'm not sure that they might not know, just as we don't know.
The numbers,
we know something's wrong.
Yeah, the numbers aren't important, so we can say, hey, we have this many people listen. It's important to use as a gauge to see if we're growing, how much we're growing. But if the numbers are being manipulated, then it is impossible for us on certain platforms where they're being manipulated to actually figure out what our growth is, what our reach is for a certain week. And it's not just us. I've noticed on the community forum, it seems to be some kind of problem that is had. But when some shows say, we had 20 live listens and now it's at 0, which is something you can find on the community forum.
You're talking about other programs, other hosts saying that, yeah. We've dropped in, for example, on other live broadcasts, either before ours and we'll notice that there might be 50 people in the chat room, for example, and they'll put up 50 people in the chat room, but our live listens are only at 2.
Yeah, we have a full chat room, 500 people, and that's not saying there's only 500 people listening live right now. There's a lot more than that. But if our live listens for the night ended up at 420, 415,
perfect example.
We know there's problems.
Yep. And there's monkey business going on with the numbers, and the numbers are also used, as Joe said, we don't really pay attention except for growth to see who we're reaching, and of course the different countries and such. But the placement of the program as well, and how it's framed and projected. You might think, well, this is just, why are you talking about this? Well, because this is happening internet wide, kind of like fudging the books on the economy. Not giving you the real straight scoop on what unemployment is, and you're looking at this and thinking, well, geez, everyone seems to be unemployed or underemployed, but yet people are saying, oh, everything's going great.
And thankfully, we have many outlets that broadcast and give out the podcast of the show. So Blog Talk is not our only source of numbers. It's one of many. But say our sponsors depended on the amount of numbers if Blog Talk said we had, that could be a big problem.
And indeed it could. All right, but look for this cutting back, this culling of the internet, and especially if something does happen, and also watch the direction too of the how conversations, threads on forums. If you belong to forums, it doesn't matter, survival forums or political forums, regardless. Watch for the hijacking of the thread through misdirection, and watch for the increase in marginalization. These are the very people who are hired by the government or are on the payroll of the government that are coming out and doing this.
Yeah,
and it's crazy.
You see some stories that have 95% or 98% to 2% calling out the bankers and the New World Order. It'd be interesting to see if those same sites that have those same kind of numbers against the New World Order talking about the real truth, if those were to kind of even out.
One thing I didn't tell you, I did get an email today, and I'm so far behind on emails still. But I want to thank everyone who's extended their thoughts and such to me. I really appreciate it. But I got an email today from Coast to Coast, the Coast to Coast, from a listener of Coast to Coast saying, well, it was pretty profane actually, but in amongst the profanity, it was you are saying that I was spewing misinformation about the banker suicides. Now, here's what I did. If you know how to do this, and it's funny, I can operate a cell phone or a regular phone half the time, but if you expose the verbose headers and you look at and you trace back through the various electronic handshakes from an email, you can actually find out the block of IP addresses, or even the IP address, depending if it's a static IP address of where this email originated. And that's something, it's email tracing 101. And it's very possible, however, that somebody could, spoof an email address, and they often do. But there are ways to tell where it originates. Well, this one individual who was not only profane but threatening it, as well as saying some things like, stop talking about this, you're making yourself look foolish, meaning the death, the suicides of the bankers. Trace back to where? You want to take a guess where? Of course, Virginia. Place in Virginia where it all centers. Now, the government has various blocks of addresses or IP numbers, and I was able to put that right. I know not only the city, I know the building, I just don't know the department. And I could tell you that it's disconcerting to see this. So if you think that things are not being manipulated and people are not being threatened, imagine, just imagine being at a higher level of visibility. So I can't tell me that they're not being threatened. So that's something that's definitely to watch. And we're going to get into now with tomorrow. We're going to get into more of Ukraine, what's taking place there, and why it's important. By the way, folks, at the highest of high levels, and this is extremely vital to understand. Go back and look at June 5th, 1990. What happened on June 5th, 1990? Well, Gorbachev visited Ronald Reagan at his ranch. He spoke at that with Reagan about establishing a new world order. And if you search for this, you'll find it on the internet. In fact, there was an article in the Milwaukee Sentinel talking about Gorbachev's reference to a new world order. Well, now we've got, or subsequent to that, George Herbert Walker Bush signed a charter called American and Russian Partnership. This is available at the government website, fas.org, and if you look at the June 17th, 1992 entry there, you'll find a copy of the American and Russian Partnership. 2 years later, Clinton signed an economic agreement with Russia. And wouldn't you know it, in a joint declaration between George W. Bush and Putin on May 24th, 2002, there was a joint declaration signed by George W. Bush and Putin, signed on May 24th, 2002. That's available at gpo.gov. So if you look at this, look at what's going on in Ukraine. This has been planned for, since at the very least in its current form since 1990. The U.S. and Russia, they're advancing what they are terming to be economic integration. Now, don't forget, George Herbert Walker Bush was also the director of this Council on Foreign Relations. He held the director's post there. So if you look at what is taking place, what we're seeing is this magic show, this illusion on the lower levels, these battles and the movement of chess pieces and the threats and what have you. But at the very, very top, at the movers and shakers, the Committee of 300 and such, what you've got is an integrated agenda for this New World Order. So while everyone is so intent on looking at the skirmishes, battles, and everything else taking place, what people are failing to see is the integration at the highest levels, at the Illuminati levels, of this advanced economic integration between Russia and the United States. The only people that are really being fooled are really the American people and people of the West. This is known throughout the world.
All people who are not paying attention to, or I should say not paying attention, all people who are not doing their own research and seeking out the truth for themselves are definitely being fooled. There is a new executive order issued today by Obama blocking property of additional persons contributing to the situation in Ukraine. Not sure if you saw that. And also, I got an alert from GovTrackUs. It's a great site. You can get email alerts for legislation as it comes, as it's presented, as it's voted on. And I came across this presidential proclamation: boundary enlargement of the California Coastal National Monument. Now, what was it? Just a few weeks back, or last week, we saw if the president signed the first time in 5 years he signed a land deal, maybe not a land deal, that's not a good way to put it, the first public land bill in 5 years, where he 36,000 acres of the Michigan lakeshore, Lake Michigan Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, is going to be protected. Well, we have a presidential proclamation, 7264, establishing the California Coastal National Monument to protect the biological treasures situated offshore on thousands of unappropriated, unreserved islands, rocks, exposed reefs, and pinnacles owned or controlled by the government of the United States within 12 nautical miles of the shoreline of the state of California. Now, obviously, for those of you who remember the Russian jets that were playing war games off the West Coast, 12 miles is the barrier of where the international waters start. And if they were to breach those 12 miles, come inside those 12 miles, they would breach United States airspace. So that's why the 12 nautical miles is significant. It goes on to say these dramatic features contribute to California's awe-inspiring coastal scenery and provide havens for significant populations of seabirds and marine mammals. Meanwhile, we have 50,000 homeless veterans in this country who cannot receive benefits as the government does not see it as a priority to take care of those that have laid their lives on the line to protect the freedoms. Instead, they want to protect seabirds and oysters and otters and other animals. And there's more to this than I have gotten into here. And with the 15 minutes we have left, I'm not going to go through this right now. We can do this tomorrow, maybe before Stan comes on. But the more interesting executive order released today, blocking property of additional persons contributing to the situation in Ukraine. President Obama uses the authority invested in him, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, the Immigration and Nationality Act, as well as other United States code, to expand the scope of the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13660 of March 6, 2014, finding the actions and policies of the government of Russian Federation with respect to Ukraine, including recent deployment of the Russian Federation military forces in Crimea, region of Ukraine, undermine democratic processes and institutions in Ukraine, threaten its peace, security, stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and contributes to the misappropriation of its assets and thereby constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Now, that last line before the posing a threat to the United States, saying that it is contributing to the misappropriation of Ukraine's assets. What does Ukraine's assets have to do with our national security?
Energy.
Is it because
energy.
The European Union receives a lot of their energy from Russia, and therefore this, and if I'm not mistaken, I have been away from the news for the weekend, but did not Russia or Ukraine as a parliament vote to be absorbed by Russia? Was there not a consensus?
Well, yes. Now, don't forget, folks, today Obama imposed sanctions on 11 Russian and Ukrainian officials. They were blamed for Russia's military incursion in Crimea, including 2 top aides to Putin. Now, the sanctions,
which he mocked.
Well, I got to tell you, of course, but they are the most obvious overt sign of U.S. the stage play, the anger at Russia's attempt to absorb Crimea. And if you look at a map, it would be good, folks, to acquaint yourselves with the geography of the area and understand the why Ukraine, why Crimea are strategically important for Russia, not only militarily but economically. But yes, you're correct. Now, of course, these sanctions are, well, I would really put this, folks, as more of a low-level game, I suppose. This is for our consumption. This is professional wrestling at its best in politics and in global politics. This is what I believe.
Now, from what I understand, the energy that is bought from Russia by the European Union flows through the Ukraine.
There are, and folks, it would really do you well to listen to the Coast interview with Greg Palast from Saturday. He does talk about this, and you're looking at really 8 major pipelines that run through Ukraine from Russia. Don't forget, Russia is the world's leading energy supplier, oil, natural gas, whatever. And also, we have to recognize the fact that Putin is a billionaire himself, personally. Now, this is a lieutenant colonel. Putin is a lieutenant colonel in the KGB and a billionaire based on his investments and in his ownership of Russian energy. But the fact of the matter is, you've got these vital gas lines that are running through Ukraine. And then you've got Russia having a military, a navy that needs the warm water seaports including Syria, and especially Syria. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, you might be tired of hearing me talk about this, but we really have to. Anytime we talk about Ukraine or Crimea, we have to bring into the discussion Syria, because it all goes back to Syria. It all goes back to what's taking place in Syria, what we've done. And the best way I know how to describe it is, we had said after the Olympics, really, the gloves were coming off, and didn't they ever, with Putin taking the stand that he did and challenging Obama, laughing at Obama and saying, yeah, okay, come on, let's go. But even at that, the agenda is much bigger than that. Of course, the players are much bigger than that. So this is to keep the West, the people like us, entertained. I shouldn't say like us, but the masses entertained, or at least entranced by what they're seeing. Oh my goodness. But in reality, you're muted. I didn't hear that. I go ahead and say that.
Well, right before you sat down, I was talking about the effectiveness of the doom distraction.
Exactly.
There is real doom out there, but to create the fake doom to bring people away from what is really of concern.
Well, one of the flashpoints, literal and metaphorically speaking, is in fact the Russia's gas pipelines. There are threats out there by neo-fascist leaders, and that term is perhaps incorrect, because what they are attempting to do is throw this on these right-wing, or I shouldn't say right-wing, politically conservative, what we would term politically conservative, values-oriented people, to destroy Russia's gas pipeline or pipelines to start a third world war. Well, this is all for our amusement, our entertainment, to entrance and to keep hold of us. But folks, I'll tell you this: there very well could be a world war that'll break out, starting regionally and then going forth beyond that. But it's going to take place in Syria more than likely, or the events in Syria will predispose the events in Ukraine and Crimea. In other words, whatever's going to happen, I would not take my eyes off for 1 minute. Syria, Libya, that entire region in that area, further west first. I would watch that, because really, I truly believe all the research, all the intelligence insiders that I've spoken with. Of course, folks, you heard the gentleman referred to as W speak on this program, and talking about this very issue. You know, he has not been wrong once with respect to the developments, global developments with Russia. He was not wrong on Benghazi. And this explains, folks, this explains why, this explains the aversion of even members of our Congress to get involved in talking about what really happened in Benghazi. The very same Western assets that were engaged in mischief in Benghazi that ended in the CIA compound being attacked are the very same Western intelligence assets that are playing on the ground in Ukraine. This is huge. We're going to see. We will see, folks, and I just don't know when. I definitely would watch the time period between April 19th and May 1st in that very, very significant, Illuminati significant time period. But I would really watch all of April and into May for some sort of event taking place in the either in Syria, in and around Syria, or in and around Ukraine. But at the end of the day, the trigger event will be related to Syria. This is what the information that I've been able to get, talking to a couple of sources after Coast to Coast into the early hours of Sunday morning. This is what I was able to come up with. That it all goes back to Ukraine, or I'm sorry, Syria. It all goes back to Syria. Watch the players there, and we must not forget that Chris Stevens was in fact CIA through and through. He was the number 2 guy, or maybe the number 3 guy up in Syria, and was shipped whatever you want to call it, 100 CIA officers and assets and agents, or I wouldn't say agents, officers and assets into Libya before Gaddafi even fell, and setting up the government there. So also the capturing of the GRS agents, multiple plural, in Ukraine recently. Well, what were they doing there? They were running interference for the IMF. So at the end of the day, this is a banker's war. This is a war that involves or is all about banking. It's all about an economic currency. It's all about setting up or continuing the Ponzi scheme of Western-backed fiat currency. In the end, we are all on the Titanic. The Titanic is sailing, the Western powers, that is, and the globalists are intent on sinking the Titanic, meaning taking out the power of the U.S. dollar, or taking out the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. What that'll do is that'll take down the middle class. That'll wipe out our ability to function normally. And of course, and I've been saying this consistently, but I really think it bears repeating. In the end, we are going to be faced with a new currency, and that new currency is going to be handled via the City of London, and I'm talking about that very special section of the City of London, where even the Queen must curtsy to the powers. And there will be people because of the devaluation of the U.S. dollar, and this happens all of the time. There will be people that will die from starvation, from the inability to buy anything. And folks, people are wondering, well, why are the Chinese buying everything up around here, our industry? Well, it's your children. It's you, if you're young enough, and your children who will be making the Nike sneakers and the Walmart-type goods in the sweatshops or once overseas.
There was a fill-in host for Glenn Beck yesterday. It had to be Friday. And as I was running errands, I had a chance to listen to a good hour of the show. He made the point that the Congress has a single-digit approval rating, yet the congressmen, whether in the House or Senate, continue to get reelected. He made the remark that Charles Rangel would be reelected even if he was dead after 6 years, and basically blaming it on the lack of voting, the lack of voting drive in the United States, and saying, well, the people who decide not to vote, but because they're choosing the less of two evils, are voting with their silence. And it made me think, how could a Congress with an 8% approval rating continue, regardless of the turnout? I mean, we saw in 2010, a historic turnout with the Tea Party. Things don't change, and it made me just think, there is much more than meets the eye with our voting system, and much more manipulation with inside the government, making sure they keep the people in power that they need to keep in power. So
precisely,
I don't think it is just a problem of people not getting out to vote. I think it is too much more of a problem of fraud and control of the votes.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, we're up against the top of the hour.
Ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Monday, March 17th edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Today, St. Patrick's Day. We are going to be joined by our very special guest in just a second. I just want to reiterate our weekly itinerary for those of you who joined us late. Tomorrow we have our stand-deo at our regular time from 9 to 10 Eastern. Then Wednesday, for the whole show, we will be joined by Doc Marquis. He will be speaking at the Orlando Prophecy Conference we will be attending, so we're going to have 2 parts. One is going to be Wednesday. The second part will be after the conference. Thursday, we will be joined by Tom Horn and Steve Quayle. And Friday, Augusto Perez, possibly with Brother Marcus. Have to verify the Brother Marcus part, but Augusto Perez will be with us Friday. So a great lineup of shows, and we have a guest with us right now.
Yeah, exactly. Now, folks, let me just say this real quick here. Our guest is known on the internet as Butter D Zillion. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, you'll see that name, and you'll see a link right there in the top of our website directly to her research, her blog, her all of the information that we're going to be talking about tonight. So definitely go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, find the links to her blog. Go ahead and click on the link. And also bookmark that link, please, because you're going to be referring back to it more and more and more and more. The information that she has uncovered is extensive, and it is somewhat, in some areas, complex. But when you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, it all fits together. Here's the subject. Well, let me just say this, too. Having spent, again, nearly 30 years as an investigator, I've worked with FBI agents, I've worked with other police forces, the investigative divisions, and I've got to tell you, you could have a book-smart person that graduates the academy, with extremely high grades, or whether it's the FBI academy or even the local or state police departments, and be a klutz in the field, or not being able to investigate their way out of a paper bag. It's not something that can really be taught you obviously you can teach the fundamentals, but there's this innate sense one has to have. And some people, you either have it or you don't. And I can tell you this, I know this guest by her real name. I know who she is, so she's not anonymous to me, to us, but she's anonymous to the internet. And that's why she uses Butter D Zillion. But let me tell you something else. I started following her a couple of years ago, watching her post on a political forum, and something interesting caught my eye. I was watching her put information out there, and I was taking that information and double-checking it, triple-checking it, looking at all the leads that she looked at, and in every case, she was right on the money in all the cases. That in all the postings that she made. And something interesting happened of late. The hand of the censorship came in, and soon I saw that her postings, especially on a political website, were being targeted, I suppose would be the best way, and she was being marginalized along with her message. Folks, the information that she has uncovered is extremely critical. And when that happens, when you do that, when you uncover something like this that we're going to be talking about tonight, you will attract not only the ire of people who don't want the information out there, but attract the ire of people who really don't want the information out there. And if you get my drift, there are the mischief makers, and then there are people who are a little bit more than that. And with that, yes, and I'm speaking to members of the Fogbow community who have really got more, I suppose, more presence than intellect, and more agenda than truth in their attacks on this researcher who I respect and admire. With that, I'd like to welcome the persona known as Butter D Zillion. Welcome to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Thanks, Doug.
I'll tell you what, it's great thank you so much for agreeing to be on. By the way, folks, Butter D Zillion is not looking for fame, not looking for fortune, not looking for, hey, look what I've done, not wanting to be in the public limelight. In fact, our off-air conversation, I think it was last week, she said, I don't want to do this. And I don't blame her, because she's got family to attend to. She's got things going on. Plus, everything that she's uncovered has been attacked. It's incredible. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of how in the world does a person like yourself just get started in all this? Looking at, our topic is going to be the Fuddy plane crash and what the video does show, but in the larger sense, you were investigating Obama and his minions early on. How'd you get started?
Well, I kind of followed on the various blogs that I was on, and whenever somebody makes a claim, I have to check it out. And when it came to Obama's eligibility, at first I thought, oh, it's kind of far-fetched that he would, surely he's got the records. They wouldn't let him go this far without it. And I didn't think much about it until Berg filed his lawsuit, and Obama wouldn't just produce the documents. So then I started thinking that there was maybe something more going on there. But then the election came along, and it seemed like it was too late. Didn't worry about it. And then Leo D'Onofrio came out with information from Ms. Tickley, where it was talking about her attempts to try to get information from the Hawaii Department of Health. And I thought, well, gee, that's something that I can do. Surely if I just send in a request, they'll just give me the answer, and I'll have it, and I'll be done with it. I will have gotten the information I needed, and I can put it to rest. So I started contacting the Hawaii Department of Health, and what I found there was just total lawlessness. It was just total lawlessness. That's pretty much all there is to it. Every kind of obfuscation that you can think of, just bad stuff. And when I realized the extent to which they were destroying records and disobeying their rules, disobeying the laws, and all that, then it became, to me, a question of the rule of law. Because if we're not able to keep our bureaucracies accountable to the law, then why even have laws? I mean, we spend all this money on politics and getting people elected and all of that stuff. Well, what difference does it make who we elect if the laws that they pass are not going to even be enforced anyway? So then it became an issue of the rule of law. And just the more that I checked out, the more I saw that the rule of law was not happening. And I invested time, and I'm very curious. So whenever something came up, I had to see how it panned out, and that led to another thing and another thing, and it just kind of spiraled.
I got to tell you, having watched your investigation, your research develop, I would not want to have you on in investigating me, and I say that with admiration because you have uncovered information that others have not. And of course, folks, her website, her blog is called the Butter D Zillion's blog. It's linked right off of our homepage. The lawlessness, that's a great term, because I think we've got to go back to how did Loretta Fuddy actually get her position with the Hawaii Department of Health? How did that happen?
Okay, that's kind of a long story there, but a very important story. She had been an underling there at the Department of Health under Shiomi Fukino when all this stuff was going on. In 2010, Arizona began a push. Some of the state legislators in Arizona began a push to pass a law requiring documentation of eligibility before somebody could be on their presidential ballot. And they didn't get that. They opted to go for the border issue instead of the eligibility issue at that point. But the legislator who had proposed that bill had said that she was going to bring it up again in the next session. Well, then in 2010, in November, that was when there was the landslide, and there was the Republicans won in a landslide. And both houses of the Arizona legislature became Republican together with a Republican governor. And so it looked like it was a good prospect for that bill to be passed that way. Well, Neil Abercrombie had resigned from Congress and had run for the governor of Hawaii and had won that. And he took over in December. Right away he appointed his own director of health, Neil Palafox, who has excellent credentials and is highly respected. And by the end of December, right around Christmas time, Abercrombie had interviews with the New York Times and with CNN saying that he was going to somehow produce Obama's long-form birth certificate, that states were coming up with eligibility bills, and it was going to be a problem, and it just needed to be taken care of, and he was going to do that. He was going to find some way as governor to be able to do that. So time went by for a little while, and then about the middle of January, he had an interview with a Star Advertiser reporter, and that reporter asked him how his research was coming along, how his investigation was coming along into finding Obama's birth certificate. And he made this cryptic comment about, well, you know, there's something actually written down in the archives. Well, that doesn't sound like what you would say if you just went and looked and the birth certificate was right where it was supposed to be. So Abercrombie's friend, Mike Evans, called him up the next day and said, hey, you know, what gives on this? And what Abercrombie told him, he then reported on his Hollywood News segments that he had on radio stations, on a couple of different radio stations. And what he said was that Abercrombie said, there isn't a birth certificate here. He looked all over the place. He went to the hospitals, went to all the hospitals. He cannot find anything, nothing that would prove that Obama was born there. So Mike Evans said this, and when it got out, the day that got out, Bertha Report had an article that was about that. And that same day that came out like that, Abercrombie forced his health director Neil Palafox to resign, but they hid it. They covered it up as though he was not forced to resign. But when the press asked Palafox why he resigned, he said, "I have no idea why I resigned." And but Fuddy
imagine that. I'm sorry. I didn't, yeah. It was one of the most unusual events, I think, to see that unfold. And you've done a marvelous job. It
really was, and especially because the Hawaii Attorney General's office at the time was circulating rumors that, you know, Palafox has a real nice medical practice there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, and and there just might be a Medicare billing fraud investigation coming up, but they would never confirm or deny it. They just kept it out there as a rumor that we might want to do an investigation on Palafox. And the guts, the courage that Palafox had, there's some things that just really make you glad. And to see that he didn't succumb to that, but that he just told the truth, that he said, I have no idea why I resigned. And, of course, Janice Okubo, the communications director for the HDOH, stepped in and said, it was for personal reasons. But when they asked him, he said, I have no idea why. And eventually, I think it was 3 days later or something like that, they came out and admitted that they had forced him to resign, but they never said why they forced him to resign. But that's how Loretta Fuddy got in there. And what happened with Palafox, it definitely makes you wonder why they got rid of Palafox. What Loretta Fuddy did as soon as she got in there, basically, was she closed up the openness. She immediately made it so that there was no longer a public email address that you could use to make your requests. You had to use a web form instead. And the thing about a web form is that you don't have any proof that you sent the request, and so they can get rid of it easily, which they've done even in cases where you've got a signature on a certified mail receipt. They still try to say they never received it, and just that kind of stuff. And then after that, shortly after that, WorldNet Daily received news from an insider at the Department of Health that they had a fake long form ready, but the problem that they were coming up with was the birth certificate number, because Janice Okubo had revealed that the birth certificate number is assigned by the state registrar on the day that it is received, and that was problematic with Obama's birth certificate number because his was received 3 days before the Nordyke twins' were received, and yet his has a number that's 3 higher than theirs. And so there's this discrepancy with the birth certificate number. And so they had this problem that they had to stick with the same birth certificate number that Obama had put on his forged short form. They couldn't wander from that, but it was anomalous, and they had to try to find a way to make it seem that it was not anomalous. So what Fuddy did is she switched it around. so that people could not request a long-form birth certificate. In the middle of March, I think it was Mickey Booth who came out, who showed that there was a long-form birth certificate that had been a certified long-form birth certificate that had been issued in the middle of March. Well, by the end of March, the request forms that they had, that Fuddy had changed, made it so that you could not request a long-form birth certificate. And then began the narrative saying that this had been a years-long standing, that they wouldn't give out any long-form birth certificates. And we've got video of people going in and ordering a long-form birth certificate. So we know that that's a lie when they say that this was a years-long policy. But Loretta Fuddy enabled them to have that policy, or to claim that they had that policy. And the way that they get around that legally is because the statute says that it is up to that the form of the copy, the method of making the copy, can be through various ways, or any means that is approved by the director. And so what Loretta Fuddy approved there is that the only kind of records that anybody could get was computer abstracts, which it's very easy to change. You press a button on a computer and you can change anything. That's a lot easier than having to forge paper records and stuff like that. And the long and the short of it then is that because people were not going to be getting long-form certificates anymore, they could just plug in whatever numbers they wanted to into the computer, and it would spit out that number and everything. And so they could switch the birth certificate numbers around, and they did that for Stig Vitalich. It came out on a CNN broadcast 2 days before Obama's birth certificate came out. They gave Stig Vitalich a birth certificate number that makes no sense with any method of numbering, and they came out with a number of other birth certificate numbers that were also fudged. So basically, she was involved in making sure that people did not have access to records from 1963, that everything that people would see would go through her first, so she could change it however she needed to change it. And there's evidence that she did that, because later on, when at first when the Stig Vitalich number came out and people realized how easy it would be to change that and how it didn't make sense with any of the numbering methods and those kinds of things. So then they tried putting out long-form records that were forged, but the records that they put out had obvious anomalies. For instance, they put out a death certificate for Virginia Sunahara that had on the top line, I think I counted 5 anomalies on there, including that it had a TH for Territory of Hawaii certificate number on there. It had that for the label, Territory of Hawaii certificate number, on a State of Hawaii death certificate. So, these are just blatant anomalies that they put on there.
Unbelievably blatant, Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to recap this because folks understand this. In my view, and I think our guest will concur, this is like the mob. I really can't think of anything better than a better example than the mob going in, beginning, we'll say, in sometime perhaps in, at the very least in January of, I think, 2011. Fuddy became interim director, I think, in January of 2011, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what you have here is the former health director of health, Palafox, who has a successful medical practice there in Hawaii, being forced out of his position to make way for Loretta Fuddy, who was selected for her cooperation. And I would contend, by the way, the cult, sect, political, nebulous organization, Subud, is really the golden thread that runs through this. But so Loretta Fuddy is installed in there. But in the meantime, all of this background which you're giving is essentially saying that the long-form birth certificate, or the papers that prove who Obama is really were forged, and then they were forged and fudged, but they made a mistake because of the numbers. So they had a problem, and they had to fix this problem. Mm-hmm. Am I pretty much right on that? Correct on that?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
Okay, all right. And so, they weren't perfect, obviously. There was a problem with this. So to run interference, and perhaps Palafox would not cooperate, but regardless, they brought their own guy, an own person in, own woman in to run the interference and to change things to their benefit, hide things. In fact, going back saying, well, this is a long-standing policy that we had. So this is what Butter D. Zillion here is exposing. So this is fascinating. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt yet. I just wanted to get that clarification or that summary out there.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is that Sheriff Joe Arpaio has always said, since he's been investigating this, what he's always said is, show me the microfilms. Show me the paper copies, show me the computer transaction logs, but most of all, show me the rolls of microfilm that have all of these birth certificates. And the thing that was from 1963, and actually you could ask for the microfilms from 1962 and from 1964, and you could randomly ask for any microfilm roll, and from that you could derive how they numbered the birth certificates. There was no way that they could fudge all of those microfilms. And so with Sheriff Arpaio having potentially, if Sheriff Arpaio can come up with federal crimes that have been committed, that he can compel, that are so compelling that Congress has to take them up, then it's all over for Fuddy, and it's all over for Obama, because those records would be subpoenaed, and there's no way that they can cover that up. Not even Loretta Fuddy could cover that up.
Interesting.
And so as Sheriff Arpaio has and right about the time, right before this crash happened, well, actually there was another crash that happened, another Cessna crash that happened on October 22nd. That was 3 days after Doug Vogt filed his lawsuit naming Loretta Fuddy as a defendant. And it was also right around the same time that Carl Gallups was saying that that Sheriff Arpaio had a separate criminal investigation that was going on that was going to be of a huge magnitude, and the possibility that there would be these federal crimes that would demand a congressional response. It's kind of like Sheriff Joe is closing in on them and saying, you're not going to be able to protect them with microfilms forever. Eventually somebody's going to see them, and then it's going to be all over for Obama and for Fuddy. And that is the setting in which this crash happened.
And folks, that is so important. That backstory, to me, is key to understanding. Well, we think of the mob, like I said, the organized crime. Going back to Palafox, just briefly, successful medical practice, you want to keep it, well, then you're going to play ball. Well, if not, we're just threatened with investigation into Medicare and Medicaid fraud or fraud of various natures. It's template, mob activity.
And we
template.
haven't, and to say that this happened in the case of Obama's eligibility records and stuff like that is not anything radical, because we've seen it happen with the IRS. We've seen it happen with Benghazi. We've seen it happen with Fast and Furious. We've seen it happen with Extortion 17. We've seen it happen with the Chrysler dealerships. We've seen it happen everywhere. This is the way these people operate.
Oh, it's so true. And I love how you look at the big picture. I like that. And I know our audience likes that as well. I want to interject something here, folks. We did a 3-hour interview with Doug Vogt, of course. Joe, I'm not sure when that or when we did that. It was right before. It was 3 days before Fuddy. 3 days before the crash, I think, or the day before.
You give me 10 seconds. I'll find it.
And I got to tell you, it was incredible. He was on. He went through all of the points of forgery. he indicated, suggested during that broadcast that Fuddy was named in the sealed affidavit as well as the public affidavit, and then bang, the crash of this alleged crash happens, and so it does fit well in here. So that's the backstory, ladies and gentlemen. So
December 4th,
Wednesday, December 4th. Okay, I'm sorry, it was about a week
ahead.
Yeah, which I find that interesting. Of course, now, okay, we can move into the crash involving Fuddy if you want now. If you think this is a good point in time, to talk about the accident or the plane crash here. It was on. Okay, all right. So roughly a week and a day after we had Doug Vogt on, Loretta Fuddy, and everyone knew, by the way, she would what plane she was taking and her schedule was. It was a known thing. It was on this secluded island. Of course, she travels there, and on the way back, interestingly enough, in the worst possible place that you could have a plane crash in terms of recovery is exactly where this happened. So, Butter Beasley and I will go ahead and let you go ahead and take it from there with the crash. What happened and what you think happened and what you found.
Well, basically, the crash. What people need to realize, or some of the things that people need to realize, is that Kalaupapa it was a leprosy colony, and it was run by the Department of Health. Everything that happened there was under the administrator that was there. For anybody to be there at all, they had to have the approval of the HDOH. If they, the administrator there handled everything. He was like a benevolent papa to everybody that was there. If they needed a new refrigerator, he would get them a new refrigerator. If they needed their roof fixed, he would make the contract and get the roof fixed. Everything had to go through him. So everybody who was there on that plane had owed something to the Department of Health, and they were only there at the permission of the Department of Health. The contracts of C. Philip Holstein and of Ferdinand Puentes, both of those were negotiated by Mark Miller, the administrator there. And Fuddy, of course, was there, and her deputy, Keith Yamamoto, was there. Rosa Key was there. She is the administrator for the National Park Service. That area, Kalaupapa, it's a national park, and it basically once all the leper patients died off, and I think there are only a few of them left. But once they had all died off, then it was going to become just a straight national park, and it would go over to the national parks. And the person who was kind of in charge of that is Rosa Key. So she was there, and her husband was there. So these are all people who, and even the tourists who were there. There were 2 tourists who were there. You could not get on Kalaupapa without having a permit from the Department of Health. So everybody who was there was approved by the Department of Health. They were only there because the Department of Health wanted them there. And the plane took off. I don't know how much everybody is familiar with the situation. The plane took off at, I think it was like, what was it, 3:25 or something like that. And
local time, yeah, Hawaii time, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I do that all the time. Talk over people. I didn't mean to do that.
Okay, no trouble. Anyway, it crashed 2 minutes later, and on board the plane was Ferdinand Puentes, who he was doing a roofing project on the Catholic Church there, and he was armed with 2 GoPro cameras and a waterproof microphone that he clipped onto his life jacket. And
that's thinking ahead, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Oh man, do you find that a little bit strange by itself? I mean,
yeah, I do, and there are more things too. Like when you look at the records of what Puentes said on his Instagram account and all that, that day was just really different for him. He posted stuff that he didn't normally post. But he said that he was filming the takeoff, and he had just got done filming the takeoff when there were these engine problems, and so he turned the camera back on, and it happened to be the camera that he was filming this takeoff with was the one that was on a stick. Now, I don't know, it would be a lot easier for me to film something in a crowded area like the cabin of an airplane if I had, just something you hold on your hand, but he used a stick, the one that was on the stick, and had that running. And when his video starts, the passengers are all just looking around, in a relaxed manner, and everything is just fine. And then you hear this horn go off, and then they start acting alarmed and all of this stuff. And they start exiting and whatnot. And there was a point there where Puentes took his hand and he covered up the camera. There were dark frames. And then he went on with this, and basically he videotaped the stuff that was all going on. All of this was going on the very first moments when the crash happened, and as they got out of the plane and they're bobbing around in the water and all of that stuff. And then he said that his battery ran out on his GoPro before any of the help arrived, and from the Maui County Fire Department incident report, we know that the help did not arrive there until 4:30. That was when the fire department helicopter arrived, and that the Coast Guard helicopters arrived after that. And basically, what happened? This video that he had, he kept it for a month, and during that time, people were having questions because the stories that came out were conflicted. They had different stories came out. First, she was stuck in the wreckage, and then she drowned outside of it, and then she didn't drown. She had hypothermia, and just all these different theories and stories that came out, and none of it really made any sense. And so people were, and the timing of her death and her being the only one who died and all that, people just had a lot of questions. And so Puentes kept this video for a month, and then after a month, ABC on Good Morning America and on Nightline played this video, and they say in the video, that there were these conspiracy theorists who were making a big deal out of Fuddy and just coming up with these crazy theories and all of this stuff. But of course, this video was going to lay all that to rest. Well, I recorded the video as it played on the computer screen, so that I would be able to put it into Windows Movie Maker and slow down the frames and actually see what was there. And when I started looking at what was really there, that they whizzed past us so fast that nobody could see, I was astounded by what I saw. And that's kind of the point at which I said, people need to know this.
All right. Now, before we get into what you found, let me ask this. Imagine this passenger of this aircraft having video. Folks, can any one of you listening to this, can you imagine a situation where you're involved in this alleged plane crash? I would call it an emergency water landing as opposed to a crash. But would there be any circumstances, any situations where you would walk away from that and not put what you've captured, we'll say, onto YouTube or share it or say, look at what I survived or look at what happened, especially when you've got a sole fatality being a member of the Hawaii Department of Health and given her position. I just found that very odd that the first notice that we got of any video was a month later. Didn't you find that? I mean, obviously you did find it odd, I take it.
Yeah, it was odd, and he didn't make any comments really on his social media stuff either, and just real quiet. And then boom, this came out, and that was supposed to settle everything.
All right. So here we have this Cessna in the water. We have people aboard floating, bobbing, waiting for rescue. The plane crashes within 2 minutes, as I believe you said, after takeoff or makes a water landing. Mm-hmm. We have the Hawaii Director of Health, the person at the epicenter of the long-form birth certificate controversy, aboard and now in the water, or not, but ultimately she did make it to the water, and now dead, or so it appears. And then a month later, bang, we have a video. So what did you find? And this is where, folks, this is where it gets really interesting, so buckle up. What did you find?
Well, what I found is there were a lot of extra people there, people that were not supposed to be there. All of the reports said that there were 9 people there. There was a pilot, Clyde Kawasaki. There was a 73-year-old tourist woman. There was a 70-ish-year-old man. There was Loretta Fuddy, and there was her deputy, Keith Yamamoto. There were Jacob and Rosa Key. There was C. Philip Holstein. And then there was Ferdinand Puentes. That was 9 people. That was those were the people who were supposed to be there. None of those people were supposed to be expecting to be in the water. None of them are black. The darkest-skinned one was Ferdinand Puentes. And yet, when I looked at what was in the water, there were a lot of extra. Well, there was what I started out with in my first YouTube video that I had, that I made, where I showed some of the stuff that was going on there. There was shiny black, round stuff, and there was yellow. There was yellow that was there, and it came up, and most people who have looked at it have said that's a diver. And I'm asking the question. Yeah, and I'm asking the question, what is this? And people see different things, but a lot of people are saying that's a diver. And in addition to that, there was something that when you look at it, when you look at the video, there are a lot of places where, you see the light shimmering off of the water, and you see the yellow of life jackets, and you see those kinds of things, and it's hard to tell sometimes what things are. There was this kind of faded yellow color that just kept lurking around, and it didn't act like a wave. I mean, a wave, it breaks and then it's gone. This didn't do that. This just kind of hung around there. And at one point, this yellowish wave, so to speak, turned around. And when you look closely, you see the face.
Interesting. And folks, let me just say this.
I watched the video with you, not to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. I do it all the time.
You showed me the video when we watched a number of times, and there's definitely something there that does not belong there. That
exactly.
Much I can say for sure.
Well, what caught my attention is this. When our guest, Butter Dieselian, put up "What Do You See?" or broached the topic, not even claiming anything, just asking for an assessment, an evaluation, independent. Open your mind. What do you see here? What I found absolutely stunning and breathtaking, and I'm not using these adjectives lightly, is in automatically she became this pariah among the researchers, alleged researchers, and she became the target of some of the most malicious attacks I have never seen. Well, I have, but not so quickly. Attacks against her integrity. I mean, it would be like me just pointing and saying, "What's that?" And all of a sudden, I'm being called everything. I mean, it was just an amazing jumping on you, and I got to tell you. And I looked at the attacks, and I'll say this: it made me reevaluate those people we think are on our side in a big way.
Very disillusioning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. So now, so we got a plane in the water, and folks, you feel free to go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the links to Butter Dieselian's blog, and also linked there as well are the two videos, video part 1 and video part 2. No extraordinary claims made here, but just mere questions. And if you look at what the evidence that is presented, folks, I guarantee you, there's something not right with this. So, okay, so you posted this in an open setting, and you're getting attacked. But what do we see here, in your view? What are we looking at?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that there are extra people who are there. I don't know enough about diver equipment and all of that stuff, but I do know, and I can see that there are people who are there, like especially and most people didn't even really address the faded yellow image, that looks kind of like a wave, but when it turns around, you see the face inside what looks like a face inside a hoodie, is what it is. But there's some kind of a light that's on the hood of that as well. I don't think you can mistake that, and nobody would address that. People addressed the rounded black shiny stuff, and people said, oh well, that's Fuddy's black pants bubbling up in the water, and the yellow is the sole of her shoe. And so I posted on my blog different images that came from the section, the piece of video that's right after what I showed in the first YouTube, and I annotated those images and just asked some questions like, okay, if this is the sole of Fuddy's shoe, then what angle would her ankle have to be at? And nobody, strangely enough, nobody wanted to demonstrate their ankle at that angle. And there were also other things. There was equipment in the water that you could see that was obviously not rubbish. I mean, what were obviously cylinders of some kind. I would suggest that they were air tanks. And there were those
not flotsam. I mean, not flotsam necessarily from the plane or objects from the plane, but something more than what was on the plane. At least that's right. What I got. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, because cylinder type of things and pipes and tubes and that kind of stuff that was showing up. And there's more. There's more with that too, because in the second YouTube video that I showed what was underwater, and in that particular instance, I showed what ABC did in their editing, because when they wanted to cut away from something particular that they were looking at, they would bob, they would have the camera bob under the water, but what they may not have noticed was that when they bobbed under the water, there was a face there of a black man in some kind of black shades, eye protection of some kind, and they bobbed under there, and so they saw him, who was not supposed to be there, and then when they came back up out of the water, they were at a different, the camera was at a different angle, so they used that underwater section to cut off what was being shown before that and cut away to something else. They did that in the Good Morning America clip. Well, then on the Nightline clip, they also did where they went to this underwater scene where you could see the black guy's face that was there, and then they swooped up and just briefly, just 2 frames that you could see, there was something that was going on in the place where Fuddy's life jacket had been, and Rosa and Jacob and Yamamoto were all just watching right at it, and there was something very big going on there. In the clearer of the images that we've got of that, it looks like there's someone who's dressed in white and there's someone who's dressed in black, and they're doing something there, right there by where her life jacket was. But Nightline, the camera went back under the water right away then. Get away from that. We don't want to look at that. But in going underwater, to be underwater long enough so that whatever was going on up above wouldn't be seen, they came upon a person who was dressed in black and who had white goggles and what looks like a yellow scuba mask that's on there. And, you know, who among those 9 people would have had a white mask and a yellow, you know, white goggles and a yellow scuba mask? You know, why would somebody have that? Well, then, and then later on in that same kind of sequence, it shows where Kawasaki is. It turns out I had thought that he was treading water, but it turns out that he was actually holding on to a black cushion together with the 70-ish-year-old man there. But behind Kawasaki, there is somebody. There's what appears to be a man with muscular arms and you know, something with an opening on it that's on his chest. That's yellow and black. That's on his chest. You can see his chin. You can see some kind of a tube that's coming down towards his chest. And again, who would that be? Which of the 9 passengers would that be? So wow. In that video, we've got the face of a black man that shows up, and it turns out that in one of the images of the black man that you see when they dip under the water, you can see that Jacob Key is holding on to this black man. So my phone is beeping at me. Just a minute. Okay. Am I still here?
Oh yeah, you're still with us. You're fine.
Okay, good. And so we see that black guy who's not supposed to be there, and Jacob obviously knows that he's there because he's holding on to him. And you also see a guy who has a white mask and yellow scuba, or white goggles and yellow scuba mask. And you also see a guy who has, you know, a guy who seems to be a black guy, very muscular, who has what seems to be perhaps a rebreather that he's got, and he's right there by Kawasaki. And, you know, so these people, you've got three different people who are not supposed to be there, in addition to the 2 from the first one I made, the YouTube that I made, the 2 people who were not supposed to be there. And they've got equipment that they're not supposed to have. And you've got the people who are the passengers hanging on to them or being right beside them. They all knew that they were there. I mean, to me, it's obvious that they all knew that they were there.
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I first saw your report of, and I'll just say this, everything that I've seen is consistent with scuba divers or divers. I don't know if you would call them scuba divers or just plain divers. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say this. When I saw this, your initial report, it did not fit with my investigative narrative. And I'm looking at this, really I was kind of hoping you are wrong, because there was nothing that I found that could have explained what I was looking at. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this is just an artifact of the camera. But as you had done and slowed things down and isolated these images, I have to say I cannot explain anything else other than the fact that there are additional people in the water and there's something going on, and the focus of this something is, in fact, or does appear to be Loretta Fuddy. Now,
yeah, and I haven't shown still images of all of this stuff either, but all throughout that video, all eyes were on Loretta Fuddy. And they were all watching what was going on.
So, okay, and now let's assume, and I think it's a good assumption here, let's assume that you're correct, that there were people in the water there, divers particularly in the water there. A number of questions arise. Were they there before the crash took place or the water landing took place? Were they aboard the aircraft? Well, you know, it didn't, based on Wendy's video, it didn't seem to be, if he was truly sitting in the back, well, who knows? But why were they there? When did they get there? Where did they come from? Who are they? What was their purpose?
And those are the
How many?
Those are the questions that I believe the American public deserves an answer to. And the people who were there have acted like nothing was going on. They're not telling anybody anything. They saw it, but they're not telling anybody anything. And I think it's about time that we had some answers for those things. As to where they came from, that's one of the questions that comes up, and it baffled me too. You know, gee, how would there? Because by the time you look at it, there are more. There are quite a few more. And you ask yourself, well, how could they have been in the plane? And that time when Puentes put his hand over the camera provides a black screen. Now, we know how ABC used the black screen. In other instances, they used it to cut away from something that they didn't want somebody to see and to move on to something else. So they used it as a transition. And by having a black screen there, he could have held his hand over the camera for however long, and then afterwards taken out those frames. And so there could be a time lapse there where he just took out those frames. And during that time, anybody who was in the baggage area, for instance, the cargo area, could have gotten out of the plane first. And in fact, when you look, I talk with different people who have more knowledge and expertise than I have, because I'm not a pilot. I don't know how this stuff works, but I talk to people and try to find out from them. And what I've gotten is that for flights like that, you don't want to have your fuel tanks all the way full, because it adds weight and it uses up more fuel and all that stuff. So you don't have your fuel tanks all the way full. And when the plane went on the water, those mostly empty fuel tanks would have been just like a pontoon. The air in those, it would have held the plane afloat. And the plane did float for quite a while. And yet, in the Puentes video that you see, by the time the ABC announcer said that you can see by Puentes' video, by the timestamp on his video, that all the passengers were out of the plane less than 2 minutes after the plane hit the water. Well, and when they were exiting, it took some time for them to exit and whatnot. So the Puentes video makes it look like the water was right up to the level of the door, the floor of the cabin, within a minute after, less than a minute after landing. Well, that would not happen because the fuel tanks with the air in them would hold it afloat for a while. And so it seems like there's time missing from the cabin portion of the video.
I find it interesting that regardless if we talk about the long-form birth certificate, the PDF copy there, or videos, various videos, including but not limited to the water landing of this aircraft, it seems like everything is being manipulated, and there's mischief that abounds. We can't get a straight answer at all. This is incredible. And when we get back from the top of the hour break here, we're going to get into a little bit more, and I think the American public will be astounded, as well as the world will be astounded, as to what you've come up with, some of your conclusions based on your research, and then, of course, the blowback. And folks, we don't
allow this Monday, January 17th edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
We just go back in time?
Oh, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. I'm glad we did not go back in time, because that would mean more winter, and we are sick of that. We have a very special guest tonight, Miss Butter D. Zillion. She is right at the tip of the spear of the plane crash, and Loretta Fuddy, the one who released the birth certificate of Obama in Hawaii, and all the anomalies that surround this interesting yet frightening, would you call it, a continuation of those who are close to knowledge of administrations ending up dead. Remember the Clinton lists. We saw certain things with Bush, if you guys remember, Senator Wellstone, and other similar situations.
Transcends political parties. We're looking at something at a much larger agenda here.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed all the information that you gave Ms. Zillion, and I am ready to just let you go right where you left off.
Okay, I'll have to try to remember where I was at.
Well, you know what? I think what we're looking at here is, let me ask a pointed question. A couple of them, actually. Number one, is there anywhere on the internet, or do you have in your possession an unedited, clean, or supposedly unedited version of the video, the entire video, or at least that was released, of the water landing attributed to Puentes? Does that exist anywhere?
I don't believe so, because I believe that, well, Puentes himself said that the video that he has is a collection of stills that he put together. So he's taken out a lot himself. And then we've seen that ABC really edited a lot of what they had. So as to the whole thing, you know, Puentes had 2 GoPro cameras, and I believe that one of those cameras was probably there to give a clear rendering of what really happened. And if we saw that, we would probably know what happened. But I don't think they're telling.
No, obviously.
I don't think they're going to tell unless there's a criminal investigation in which those records are subpoenaed.
Okay, now, can you think of any reason why, and we're probably covering ground we already covered, but is there any reason why Puentes would, well, I'll ask you to speculate. Why would Puentes videotape or tape, film, whatever you want to call it, the events of what happened that day on the plane and off the plane? Why would he, not what he said, or not what he said why he did it, but why, in your theory, did he videotape? Well, in my theory, I believe that they all knew that something was supposed to happen that day. And either, well, we know that it was supposed to end up that Fuddy was no longer with us, either because she was dead or because she was skirted away. And for me, my belief is that these are good people who would not have watched somebody kill somebody who they thought was their family. And so my theory is that that the plan was to snatch Fuddy away, to make it look like she was dead, to give her a new identity, like they did with the Benghazi witnesses, to make it clear that she was. And so within that theory, it makes sense for Puentes to be documenting all of this stuff, because knowing the suspicions that were going to be coming, they would need proof that they did not kill her. All right. So are we saying here, based on your research, your investigation, that we've got 8 or 9 people who are in on the conspiracy, or everybody on that plane? We'll say everybody on that plane. Go ahead. I believe that everybody who was on that plane knew that there were extra people in the water.
Yeah, that's my question. Is the plane kind of went down, you could say controlled or uncontrolled. Well, how did the divers, unless there were multiple teams of divers, know where to be when that plane went down?
Now,
that's my biggest question.
Okay, yeah, and that is a question. And there's on Free Republic, there's a poster there who was a special ops guy, and he gave his opinion. And basically, what he was saying is there's no way that they could have that if there were divers there's no way that those divers could have been there in the water, and the plane would have landed in precisely the right place. Now, this kind of leads to something else that has kind of come up. There was the person who said that he found this crash the first of all. Well, there are 2 different counts of who saw the crash first. Mark Miller, the DOH administrator for Calipapa, said that there was a Navy plane in the area that was doing touch and goes at the airport runway. Now, you need to realize that the runway, I mean, they just got off of the runway, and boom, this crash happened. So when you talk about somebody being there at the runway, you're talking about them seeing everything being in full view, because it's just right there. Okay, so he said that there was a Navy plane that was at the airport that was doing touch and goes on the airport landing strip, and that it was fortunate that person was there because that person could report that the crash had happened. Now, the Navy did do exercises there at the Kalapapa runway. In fact, they had just requested to be able to do a lot more exercises there at the runway and had been refused to do more exercises there. So Mark Miller knows what a Navy, he knows what a Navy aircraft looks like. There was also a guy by the name of Josh Lang who said that he and his girlfriend were flying to Maui, and they decided to go that particular way or whatever, and so they called the Molokai Tower and for clearance or whatever, and the operator at the tower asked them if they heard a faint emergency locator transmitter beeping in the area. So they decided to check it out, and they went and they found this crash, and they reported it to the tower. Then they went back to the airport to see if somebody was there to help, and nobody was there at the airport to help. So then they went back to where the plane was, where the people were, and flew over them repeatedly for the next hour or so to give them comfort, the comfort of believing that they were going to be helped. And it was said that he swooped down low to give them comfort and all of this stuff. So we've got two different stories of who saw this crash first and reported it and what they were doing. And both of these sources are reported as swooping down and back up. And Josh Lang took some photographs of what he said was that crash. He had most of them were from quite a distance, and you couldn't really tell what anything was or anything. But he had one photo that was a closer shot. And what I noticed with that is that there are quite a few signs of Photoshop in that image there. For instance, the plane in the Puentes images has two bumps on the top of the roof of the plane, and the Lang photo only has one. And when you do the analysis, you find out that, some people would say, well, okay, the other one was just in shadow, so it didn't show up or whatever. But when you do the analysis of how everything fell, the measurements and all of that stuff, you find that the positioning of that one bump that's on Lang's plane doesn't work for either of the two bumps that were supposed to be there. And that bump is crooked with the rest of the plane. The Lang plane also has a lip above the windows where the Puentes plane did not have a lip above it. There's turbulence that shows in the water. There's turbulence, and that turbulence just kind of sneaks up into the strobe light on the right, the plane's right tailpiece. When you look at the plane, at Lang's plane, as it's caught in the camera while he's taking this picture, you can look and you can see that the water in the ocean is blurred out and lightened around the contour of the plane, which I don't know of any shadow that works that way. And then
that's indication of photo manipulation or manipulation of the image, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems to me, and then I also did some experiments to see what was the deal with the door was open on the plane that was in the image, and all you could see, and I missed it at first because all you can see is this little line, and it's supposed to be that you only see this little line because the angle of the door to the camera is such that it's just right even with it. Well, so then I did some experiments where I cut out a shape that was to the same dimensions as the door that shows in the Puentes videos, and I held it to the light and watched how the shadows fell and saw how it would have to be to make this this door that had a window that was horizontal, and how it would make this shadow that has a vertical window, and how that would happen with the angle of the door having to be so that it just makes a line when the camera looks at it and stuff. And I as far as I can tell from the experiments that I did, there's no way that could happen in real life.
Just like the birth certificate or the certificate of long birth. Yep.
Yep.
So we're seeing a pattern emerge here of manipulation of photoshopping everything. So just to be clear, you've got the Joshua Lang flying a plane and taking photographs of the crashed plane or the plane in the water. You've got Puentes taking video, video, yes. I mean, that's essentially what he did. And now, did you say there was a third source of images? Or no? Just the two, Lang and Puentes. Is there a third source of images, or?
Just those ones. Well, I think I'm not sure where all there. There was an image of a Navy Seahawk that was there, and this is what I was getting to with the Lang photo is, why Photoshop that? Why Photoshop that close up if the photos that he took of the plane, from far away was the same plane? Why Photoshop that? And when I processed that, I kind of have to conclude that it must not have been the same plane that he photographed, because otherwise he would have had no need to Photoshop it. And so the question then for me was, well, why would he take photos of a different plane in the same area at a different time, like a different day or something? And why would he pass that off as being this same event? And what occurred to me was that the images that he's got there show a wide area with nobody. Nobody's around. There are no planes around. There are no people around. There's nothing anywhere. Just this lone plane with nobody near it, and his own plane. And as I think about that, Mark Miller said that there was a Navy plane that was there doing touch and goes. And we know from the photos that were there is a photo of a Navy Seahawk that was there above the water. And there's another photo of the Navy Seahawk above the land around there. So we know that there was a Navy Seahawk that was there that didn't make it in any of the reports. Nobody wanted us to know that it was there, but Mark Miller mentioned it. And what he mentioned is that it was going up and down. It was going close to the ground, and it was coming back up. Now,
could a Navy Seahawk, and forgive me, I'm not even familiar with what that is. I take it it's a plane, right? Navy Seahawk, or a helicopter. So one could presume that helicopter might have had, divers aboard, perhaps, right?
Well, that's one of the things that the Seahawk is designed to do. It's designed to do helicasting in water or on land.
Okay, all right.
And so a person might, if there was a Navy Seahawk that was there and it was doing helicasting of equipment and divers and stuff like that, there would be reason to want people to not know that was going on, and that would be a good reason to Photoshop some stuff if you needed to.
Well, yeah. Now, do you think, and I'm asking you to speculate here, of course, do you think that the Photoshopping or the alterations were done by the individual or individuals that took the images, or do you think that the images were turned over and the Photoshop was done, we'll say, by a facilitator or someone else? For example, Joshua Lang taking photographs. Do you think he might have Photoshopped what he had taken?
It's hard to say. What I do know about Josh Lang is that he graduated from Albert Einstein High School, which is it's in a place that is rumored to be a bedroom community to D.C. for the NSA families. And so the Facebook friends, he's got a lot of Facebook friends that are from Albert Einstein High School, but he's got connections on his Facebook page that are kind of astounding, actually, because he's got on his Facebook page, let me see if I can find this. I've got it written down. I keep forgetting the names of it. But one of the people who was his friend on his Facebook page was Erin Billings, who works for the Podesta Group. She headed up their coverage of Obama's 2008 campaign. She's known as a person who gets things done. She's a friend of Josh Lang. Keith Langley, who has had IT contracts with the Department of Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs. He's done investigations of major banks that are in bankruptcy, that kind of thing. Felipe Furstenberg, who heads up the security details for the Department of State right now. Tim Connor, who's a contractor for the State Department. There are a lot of his friends from D.C. Sean Connor, whose girlfriend works at the White House. She and Sean had their photo taken with Barack and Michelle at the 2013 White House Christmas party. Those kinds of connections that were going on. In addition, Josh Lang does aerial photography, aerial videography for movies. So he's got connections to movie producers and like stunt pilots, that kind of thing. And also he does contract flying for the U.S. government. So for this guy, for anybody to just coincidentally be there right at that time is, you can kind of wonder about it. But for this particular guy to be there, you definitely have questions about that because there are a lot of connections that are there. Now, would he have photoshopped it? I don't know. I just know that it really looks like it's photoshopped.
Well, yeah, and that's, we can speculate all day long, but the fact is we don't have to because just what you said, just there with all the connections and the happy accident of Josh Lang being in the area, and you know what, folks, look, it could very well be, but what are the odds? I mean, what are the odds? You start taking all of these things and looking at everything in totality, and we're seeing some pretty insurmountable odds. Okay, all right. Now but also with respect to the video that was shown on ABC, Nightline, Good Morning America, wherever it was shown. At what point was that altered, edited, or otherwise manipulated? Was it done at the newsroom level, do you think?
That I don't really know. What I do know is that on February, I took a Bandicam recording of it on February 9th, of the Nightline one. The Good Morning America one I did on January 24th. And at that time, those files were pretty clear. They were not pixelated. There was good quality, and that's why I was able to see a lot of this stuff, because it was clear for me to see. I realized that I was experiencing some things with my computer. And I don't like to say a whole lot about it because I think it encourages the people who are hacking my computers and stuff. But I realized that people had the capability of finding out what I was up to. People who didn't want me to be up to what I was up to had the capability of finding out what I was up to. And so I asked my ping list at Free Republic, I asked them to, on February 10th, I asked them to save those MP4 files before they got disappeared. Because, if my computer went bad or something like that, and that would be lost, and that would be terrible. So I asked them to save that so that the evidence wouldn't just go away. And then the next day, I figured out a way to save the MP4 file directly without having to do the Bandicam recording and all of that stuff. And I thought, oh, well, that would be a clearer version of it because you skip the recording step and all that. So I saved that. But when I looked at it, it was very badly pixelated. And so somehow ABC knew to pixelate those videos on February 10th. And when I looked in the archive.org, they had backups. They had backups of those files that were on February 11th. So
wow. Okay. And this, by the way, folks, I followed this intently on on her post on the Free Republic. I followed this intently, and I was watching and waiting, and I could just see. It almost seemed like I got to tell you, it just seemed like there was this buildup of you were getting hit at that time by all sides, and I did notice something that was very curious. What you said earlier about somebody being, or it seemed like people knew what you were doing on your computer before you publicly released it. Well, we've seen that happen, and we have reports of this taking place. So, folks, please understand this does happen, and there's a long list of suspects. But go ahead. Okay, so things were pixelated, virtually unusable. I mean, in terms of evidentiary value, in my view.
Yeah, because they were pixelated so badly. But I had the clearer recordings that were made, and in my first YouTube video, I did, I was careful to make sure that I documented that this was really from ABC. I knew that it was going to be more pixelated than what I had, but I wanted everybody to see that I was getting this from ABC itself. And so I did a Bandicam recording of my computer screen while I went to the Good Morning America site, and I downloaded the MP4 file, and I saved it on my computer, and I imported it into Windows Movie Maker, and I moved it to just the right place, and then I played the slowed down version of the frames. I captured one of those. I did a screen cap of one of those. I put it in Paint and saved it, and then I imported it into Windows Picture Manager so that it could be brightened up so people could see it real clearly. And I wanted to show very clearly that this was from the ABC. I'm not making this up. And I gave, in various places, I gave explicit instructions how anybody could do this for themselves, and they could absolutely see everything in context. I wasn't hiding anything. This, they can go find this. This is nothing peculiar to me. You can go see this. This is what's there. But then after I had done that, I realized also that people needed to see the non-pixelated stuff. And so under fair use terms, I posted still images of what I had from the Bandicam recordings that I had, which are the clearest versions that we have right now, are those Bandicam recordings. And I had asked ABC, I didn't know whether it would be a copyright violation if I posted the whole Bandicam recording that I had under fair use terms. And so I asked ABC if it would be okay if I posted these Bandicam recordings that I had and post them at a quarter speed so that people could see what was really there, and they said no.
Yeah, I saw that. Folks, believe me, she has documented everything that she's telling you, and it's accessible on her website. I just want to remind people listening to this broadcast, go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. The link to Butter Dieselion's blog is right there, as well as the two videos. It's imperative, ladies and gentlemen, that you take a look at the two videos, and please, please, please read the investigative research that she has done. This is absolutely critical, because in the larger scheme of things, we are looking at, we're being lied to, but we're also identifying not only the liars, but those who are facilitating the lie. Go ahead.
And something that I want to say too, and I hope this doesn't get me into trouble, but ABC knows what's on those. They know what's on those, and to me, when I think of the gall of saying, on air, that of course these videos will get rid of these crazy theories by these crazy conspiracy theorists, and they know darn good and well what's in there, and they're saying this. And to me, this is the definition of Alinsky. And one of the reasons that I wanted to come out with this, even though, some would say, oh, it's a distraction or whatever, the reason that I wanted to come out with this is because I want people to see loudly and clearly exactly what Alinsky is and exactly how bold the followers of Alinsky are to use the very proof against them as their way of crowing over the people who are seeking the truth. The audacity of it is astounding, but I want people to absorb that and to really fully understand what these people are doing, what they know they're doing, what they're capable of doing, and how they're getting away with it. Hello? 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 Are you there?
You're going to have to call me back. I'm going to hang up on you guys. Call me. All right, guys, we should be back up. Can you hear me? All right, we're going to get this back up and going. Yep, you can hear me. Okay, good. Dad, give me your buzz, and I'll tell Troy to do the same.
My Skype is went out.
Okay, well, if you can't use Skype, I suggest picking up the cans and string. We're going to call our guest back while you figure out what you're doing. Miss Butter D. Zillion.
Oh, there we go. Got it back.
All right.
Folks, are we
Miss
on?
Zillion. Miss Zillion?
Hi.
Hi. I got to tell you something. We were totally knocked off the air.
Off the internet, off of our phone line, and it just jumped back on.
Okay.
So we apologize.
Was it something I said?
Probably.
Yeah.
It usually is.
We're going to blame it on you. Folks, you know, these, and I just want to be very clear, we get attacked like this. More importantly, you know, here we have Butter D. Zillion, who's an internet name. We're doing research. She's a very adept, very good researcher. She's a busy mother of four Christian woman who's just trying to bring us the truth, what she has found. And I guarantee you this was a direct attack on us, and we've had this happen before. But so it does to me, it does to me confirm that you're hitting some rough nerves here, some exposed nerves.
Mm-hmm.
Saul Alinsky tactics, there you go, making it sound like we're a couple of amateurs broadcasting from our grandma's basement. Okay, but that's not the case. But okay, so Saul Alinsky tactics, these people know what's going on here. Go ahead and continue with what before we were so rudely interrupted.
Well, I was just saying that you know, they know to cover this up. They know what's there. They knew when to cut away from certain images and to dip underwater, and you know, they knew all of this stuff. They didn't want anybody seeing what was really there. Millions of people saw them call people like myself crazy. But they will not allow people to see what they actually put out there. And it's, you know, it's, well, I better not say anything because I don't want anybody to be sued. But basically, it's Alinsky. It's trying to marginalize us, even though we've got the images. The images are right there. Anybody can look at those images. Those images speak for themselves. And yet they're calling me the crazy one.
Yeah, you know, and that's something, ladies and gentlemen, that I'll say this. Our guest has taken so many hits, so many, not only computer hacks, but you've been marginalized, you've been poked, you know, made fun of. It's marginalized, it's vilification, it's destruction. I mean, it's incredible. But what got me, too, is watching this unfold as you presented your evidence. The methodical attacks have not just come from the outside, but even from within. And, I mean, what's that about?
Well, I think some of it is normalcy bias. we don't want to believe that something like this could really happen, because when you think of the scope, when you think of the number of people who had to, for me, as I was trying to figure out what was going on, a friend of mine suggested, well, Nellie, maybe, or Bertie Zillion, maybe they're trying to hide her. Maybe it's not really killing her, because at first I thought, well, they killed her and everything, and it sounded crazy to me that they would be trying to hide her or whatever. But I thought, well, I'm going to go wherever the evidence takes me, because that's the best way to go. And as I looked at it, one of the points of turning for me in realizing that this thing could really happen was when I actually looked at the U.S. Coast Guard protocols for rescues. P.J. Ornat, who was the U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmer who first came to Loretta Fuddy, and he told the media that she was unresponsive, and so the protocols meant that he had to go on to somebody else. And I thought, well, if they killed her, did they give her poison, or could she have faked it, or just trying to figure out exactly what was going on with that. And then I decided to look up the United States Coast Guard protocols there, and what I found, and a lot of the stuff that I'm saying here I've got in a post on my blog. If you go to my blog, you'll see a lot of this stuff. But basically, and I will give links to document the things that I've said eventually. I just didn't have time to get it done today. But what I found was the document that they had, they've just changed within the last year or so. They've just changed it to allow that there are some times when they don't have to do first aid. And until then, they had to do first aid for everybody. But they wanted to get away from doing futile care on people who, so they changed the regulations. So now the protocol says that you can pass up somebody if they've got their head, their heart, their lungs, or their liver separated from the rest of their body, or if they're in rigor mortis, they're stiff. That sets in about 2 hours after death at room temperature. It would be longer than that in cold temperatures, like in the water. Or if they've got lividity, which is where you've got fluid collecting at the lowest part of the body, and that also sets in, a couple hours after death at room temperature. Okay, so the protocols say it's okay to pass somebody by as long as they've got their head, heart, lungs, or liver disconnected from the rest of their body, or they're stiff as a board, or they've got water pooling. In other words, they've been dead for 2 hours at least.
Right. Lividity, by the way, is the pooling of blood at the lowest. Yeah, you're correct. Lividity is the telltale signs, is the discoloration because of the pooling of blood at the lowest part by gravity. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and continue.
So basically, if somebody's been beheaded or disemboweled, or have their heart or lung, when there's that kind of injury where there's no way they could survive it, or if there's proof that they've been dead for a couple of hours, then it's okay to pass them by. And yet P.J. Ornat said the protocols demanded that I pass her by. And I immediately thought, he's not telling the truth. Why would, and I love our military. And why would somebody say something that was not true? And that's when I really began to think, they're trying to protect her. They're trying to cover for her. I don't believe that they would lie to kill her. But they could be persuaded to lie, if commanded to lie, in order to make it appear that she's dead so she can be safe. And the fact that they said that, it confirmed to me that there were people who were in on this.
Okay.
And as I was what I was going to say is that the normalcy bias, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see the United States Coast Guard telling you things that are not true. You don't want to see that. Of
course not. No, we don't. But we've been seeing it more and more. Now, I've got to say, I'm a kind of a hard sell on the fact that she's still alive. My mind is open. My investigative research is inconclusive with respect to this. Mm-hmm. Yours, on the other hand, now you've made some logical steps forward in this. What would be the value of keeping her alive as opposed to just killing her off?
Well, I believe that she has family that wants her alive.
And she has the clout.
Yeah, well, I think that when I think of the prospect of the theory, and that's really what it is, it's a theory, because I'm just speculating. It's wild speculation. What I want is for us to not have to speculate. I want us to get answers. But in the speculation end of things, her family, how many times in all the reports do you hear people talking about, we're all such family and, we're all together and all that. I believe that of those people who are on that plane, I believe that those people who were there would have done a lot to protect Loretta Fuddy. I believe that they thought well of her, and I've seen the I was looking into Scotty Schaefer, and I looked at his testimony that he had on behalf of having the helicopter, the Maui medevac come and all that. And these are pleasant people. I mean, they're likable people. And it's obvious that they're fun-loving and that they care about people. And I think they would want Fuddy protected either from the crazy birthers like myself or from Obama. And that may be a reason to hide her.
Interesting. Frankly, I have not thought of it that way. So it's almost like a conspiracy within a conspiracy, in kind of an oblique way, I suppose. Well, it doesn't have to be. It could go a number of different ways. What about Subud? Now, you and I spoke off air about this. I know that, I really believe that this organization, this nebulous, indescribable, even the people involved in this limited, small organization known as Subud, they can't even describe what it is. But the fact of the matter is, you have Fuddy, Obama's mother, and arguably Obama involved in this, this whatever it is. What's the role that you found, if any, that Subud might have played? And if you haven't really investigated that deeply, that's fine. But have you found anything at all?
I haven't really looked into that, but I know that there are others who are looking into it, and I think that it deserves closer examination because it probably does factor in. I just haven't really checked into it much.
Okay, all right. We've got about 10 minutes left of the program. In wrapping this up, if we take a few steps back and take a look at the bigger picture, where are we going with all of this? I'll just throw out the question too. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to cover in terms of the events, specifically with respect to Fuddy, the plane, and anything else that we've touched on?
Well, one of the things that I think deserves that needs to be said is that I have been making FOIA requests for all of the records involved with this because I think that we do deserve answers, and I have gotten nothing but stonewalling. The records that I have gotten are from the Maui County Fire Department. That report is actually truncated because the point that they moved one part of it to the end of the other to kind of obscure the fact that where they ended at 5:21 with the U.S. Coast Guard having one in critical condition on board their helicopter, and they were trying to decide whether to take that person to Honolulu or to Maui. Now, think of that. Okay, the NTSB in their report, the worst injury that they had listed on that was Kawasaki, who had a concussion. And yet you've got this report that at 5:21, the U.S. Coast Guard has a person in critical condition on board their helicopter. Is that Fuddy? If that's Fuddy, then everything everybody said before is wrong. If it's not Fuddy, who the heck is it? Because they gave accounting of everybody else.
That's a very good point. So right there, folks, it's obvious that somebody is lying. There's at least one critical lie taking place, regardless of what. That's a lie. It's a deliberate misconception or a misdeed here that's being foisted on the American public or on the public in general. So we know that there are lies. But yeah, who is that? Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
And that deserves an answer too. And the U.S. Coast Guard, their policy is that they have to give an account of each person that they deal with, each victim that they deal with. They have to describe the condition. They have to describe who came upon them, what condition they were in, what they did for them, and what was the ultimate outcome of it. They have to do that for every person that they deal with. Now, I've been trying to get the U.S. Coast Guard records from that. I was told that I could get them, but I was told that they were in the database that can only be administered, it can only be handled through the D.C. office. The D.C. office told me, oh, well, that's Hawaii records. You got to go to them. So they sent me to Hawaii. Well, then Hawaii said, no, those records are in the D.C. database, and only the D.C. people can handle that. So I'm being bounced around like a rubber ball, and nobody will answer my phone calls. Nobody will answer my emails. It's crazy. So you've got that going on. I also I was trying to get the records of the airport records from the Hawaii Department of Transportation Airports Division. And I called a guy and talked with him and explained to him that I had been told that I couldn't get any of those records because there was an NTSB investigation that was going on. He said, no, that's not how we do things. He wanted to know who sent me that email saying that, because that's not how they do things. He was going to really help me figure this out and get the answers that I needed. Gave me a bunch of phone numbers, very, very helpful. I didn't hear from anybody, so I called him back a week later. 180-degree turnaround. I mean, 180-degree turnaround. No. If there's any kind of investigation, we can't give any records at all. I said, well, how can any of the news? Yeah, he had apparently talked to his superiors, and they had told him what, and that was that. Earlier I had when I first submitted my request for the HDOT, I called a guy who was there to find out if they got the request, and I asked him if he could send me an email, just confirming that they got the request. I just wanted to know that they got the request and have proof that they got the request. He said, well, he would have to ask his superiors because they have a block on my email address.
Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, they're monitoring my email address. There's stuff they don't want to tell me. They know me, and they don't want to give me stuff. The FAA said, oh, we can't give you any records because there's an NTSB investigation. Well, the NTSB is not a criminal investigative body, so it
right.
That doesn't go with it. But one of the hacker on my computer, my email request for that FOIA request was one of the things that was hacked. When you looked on the sent items, it had it there and it looked like everything was fine, but when you clicked on it, that message was removed. So somebody who's hacking my computer is very concerned that I not be able to get the FAA records.
Very interesting. Have you been in contact with the Cold Case Posse, Sheriff Joe Arpaio and Mike Zullo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're very busy right now, but yeah, I've been in contact with them.
All right. So there is something being done there. What about the? And you don't have to speak on this, but one of the biggest detractors, the loudest detractors, is this Fogbo person and group, the minions behind this. You want to address that at all, or you think that would just be a waste of time?
Well.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah, I hate like heck to even give him. I hate to give him quarter, but you know what? They're drawing them out, identifying them, and saying, you know what? These people are just overly zealous in trying to put you down in terms of your findings. Well, I mean, really. Well,
I guess the thing that I would say is, if you really have such great content to talk about, then why not talk about the content? Why do you have to go all Alinsky? Why is Alinsky your route? Why not actually address the content? I asked what you saw. Why did nobody say what you saw? There were people who responded who said, well, I don't know what it is that I saw, but it's not a diver. It could be anything. I don't know what it is. It could be anything, but I know for sure it's not a diver. You know,
yeah.
well, wait a minute.
It's really a fallacious argument at that level. You don't have. I mean, it's just beyond ridiculous. What about the conservative side? If you want to address that, and again, you don't have to. Have you been surprised at the attacks you've received from the so-called conservative, even conservative Christians, or conservatives, period?
Well, I guess the thing that I would say with that is I understand the prospect of normalcy bias. I understand that we don't want to believe that this thing could really happen because that, my own sister at one point said, if I believed what you believe, I would not be able to carry on. Ignorance allows you to live. And so I can understand that. But what I also know is that we're living in really, really dangerous and bad times, and civilization as a whole stands on the edge of a knife, and denial is not going to get us through this. We've got to confront it before it's too late. And for some of them, I think there's this thing of, I don't want to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, and I'm afraid of people saying that I'm crazy and all of that stuff. And I believe that at some point we've just got to hit Alinsky where he hurts, and we've just got to say, we have to return to an evidence-based epistemology. We can't just say, because this sounds crazy, we're going to wipe it away. No, you have to go by what the evidence says. And as long as people are afraid of name-calling and will avoid looking at evidence because they're afraid of name-calling, then we're never going to get out of this mess.
You hit the nail right on the head, and I'm so thankful to have you on. We're up against the close of our program. We've got about 60 seconds left. Any parting words at all? I mean, I frankly, I think you just gave them, but anything additional that you want to add?
I guess I would just say that I would ask people to do whatever they can to make sure that all the millions of people who saw what ABC put out, saying that it would silence all questions, that people just take it upon themselves to make sure that they point out to some of those millions of people what really was there. Well said.
Well said. Thank you so very much for being a part of our program tonight. I do
You're
hope.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, your research is brilliant, and we will continue to follow everything. And I do hope that in the future, if you do decide to continue this route of investigation, I know you're busy personally, but I hope that you would come back and visit with us again.
God bless
you're always
you,
welcome.
And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, well, that'll do it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Our very special guest was Butter D. Zillion. Visit her blog via HomelandSecurityUS.com. The links are there. Very, very interesting 2 hours. Extremely well worth the passing this along to others. Tomorrow night, absolutely. Tomorrow night, Standeo. Until then, folks, God bless. Stay safe.